Hey guys, in this lesson, we're going to be going over what to do before we paint our ceilings, okay? So maybe you have a flat ceiling. You're going to want to go ahead and sand it if you haven't sanded it yet, and make sure that's completely smooth, that there isn't any flaws. If you have a knockdown ceiling or a textured ceiling, so specifically knockdown, there's a step that we like to do right before we actually go through and paint it or prime it. And we're going to use ourselves a pole sander or an angle sander, okay? You can use this as well, but we like to use a pole sander. And we just have like a 120 grit on here. And we go over our ceiling, and anywhere that we see little chunks that we didn't get knocked down, we're just gonna take our pole sander and just run it over it lightly and just knock any chunk off before painting. You guys, if you have those little chunks that are left on the ceiling and you paint over them, you're gonna see all these little pieces and it's not gonna look as nice or as smooth. So we like to go over our ceiling and go ahead and sand them all down. Plus, if there's an area that you forgot to knock down, you can actually use the sander to go ahead and sand those pieces of mud down a little bit so it'll look like the rest of your knockdown ceiling. So be sure to go ahead and get your sander in on the sides. Get the corners nice and cleaned up. You don't need to sand a lot. You can actually over sand. So just sand lightly, go through, make sure it looks fairly good, and then go ahead and we're going to show how to paint this. And after you put one coat of paint on, you can go ahead and go through and sand it one more time just in case you miss something, and then your final coat of paint. So we're going to show that here in this lesson of how to paint like a pro. All right. So go ahead, go sand your ceilings. If they're not sanded, get them ready, and we're going to start painting. All right, guys, here's a couple things we're going to be using. We're going to have ourselves a paint tray, and we have ourselves a 14-inch roller. You can use a 9 or an 18. That's totally fine. And here we go. We got a couple different rollers. For a textured ceiling, we're going to use a 3/4 inch nap. Okay. And if you're doing a flat ceiling, I would suggest probably using a 1/2 inch nap. Okay, you can get 18s, 9s, you can also get these 14s, we like 14s. And then what you're also gonna want is just a cup and a brush, okay? So let's go ahead and I'm gonna go show you how to paint. All right, guys, here we go. We've sanded our ceilings, we've made sure there's no chunks, you have a completely finished ceiling. It's ready to be painted, okay? Like I said before, we're using a 3/4 inch nap on this roller. For our textured ceiling, use a 1/2 inch nap for a flat ceiling. One thing I'd like to note as well is the paint that you guys are going to use. Guys, at this point in time, we would actually prime a ceiling, and the paint that we have is a primer and a paint. It's an ultra flat ceiling paint, okay? So it works as a primer as well. Go ahead and prime your ceilings. If you're going to paint them of any color, you want to put a primer coat on first. Just a cheap primer would work. But what we like to use is just an ultra flat ceiling paint. And then we can just do 2 coats of that and be done, okay? So I would suggest keeping it an ultra flat or a flat. Don't go to a, like a satin or an eggshell, because the more of a sheen that you have in your paint, the more flaws it's gonna show in your ceiling. So try to keep it flat, and it's gonna look a whole lot better when you're done painting. So here we go, let's get started. We're gonna roll. And one thing I like to do, I don't like to soak my roller in the paint. Go ahead and bring that in here, let's show that. I don't like to soak it. I don't want to dunk this completely into my paint. I'm just going to go down and touch the paint with the actual roller cover. And look at that. Just get it nice and full. Then I'm going to use this just to kind of get a little bit of the excess off. I don't need it soaking wet, but I do want it full. I don't want to be running a dry roller on the ceiling. Typically, people are usually not putting enough paint on their ceilings when they're doing it. So here in this room, guys, we don't have finished walls. That's why you see our tape and plastic still on. So I'm just going to go ahead and get a little bit of paint in a spot, and already I'm running out of paint. So it's going to take a little time sometimes to get your rollers nice and full of paint. So I'm going to roll a little bit more. And guys, one thing about painting ceilings is you want to be very careful, especially if it's a flat ceiling, about leaving any lines or any kind of stop marks. So I'm going to show you here how a professional paints. And so we're going to run the whole ceiling before we pull off the ceiling. And if I do pull off the middle, I'm going to feather it off like that. I'm not going to come into the ceiling like this and then just stop and pull it off. You can leave a stop mark of paint on your ceiling. So you're going to want to run the whole ceiling, either pull off at the edge like this, or come into here and just kind of feather it off. All right, I'm already out of paint, so I'm going to get some more paint here, really load it up. That's why I like these 3/4 inch naps for the texture. It does a great job of just staying full and getting lots of paint on there. So here we go. I'm overlapping where I had already painted just a little bit. Coming through. I need a little bit more paint here. You're going to find that the first coat is going to take a lot more paint than the second coat. About 300 square feet per gallon of paint, okay? That's a rough estimate. So here we go. I'm just going to come back over, make sure I don't have any lines. Beautiful. Oh, our knockdown ceiling, guys, you can kind of cheat it a little bit if there's a little bit of a line or an issue with your roller. It's going to hide because you have a texture on your ceiling. Even if you had an orange peel ceiling, it's going to hide it. If you have a flat ceiling, you're going to want to look down the ceiling as you're working and make sure you don't leave any lines or make sure you don't leave any stop marks, because those things will show. So one thing I would mention too, that if you did have any flaws in your ceiling before you start painting, go ahead and fix them. Maybe you need to retexture, or you need to touch up something and go ahead and sand it again. Do that all before we come and actually start painting, because after you paint, it's going to take 2 coats of paint to cover any of your mud that you put on your ceiling after that. And again, this is a primer paint, guys, not just a paint. Okay, most places you can find exactly what I'm talking about. It's an ultra flat ceiling paint. This is what we use. So I believe the color is a bright white. Obviously, you may have different plans on what you want to do with your ceiling. So if you're going to go with a color of a different kind of paint, make sure you are going to prime it first. And here I've got some chunks in my paint. We're just going to go ahead and pull those right out. You don't need those. Use your finger. You can sand in between this coat and the next coat as well. We're just pushing it right in. Awesome. Let's go ahead and show you guys how we cut. Well, I'll finish painting this out, then I'm going to show you guys how we cut. We don't ever like to stop painting on the ceiling. You want to finish an entire ceiling before you stop. Okay, so I don't want this to dry and then come over and do it, because it'll actually create a lap mark on a flat ceiling. Texture doesn't really matter, but we're just going to finish this out and then we'll show you guys how we cut. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and cut now. So I've rolled close to the edge, but there's about 1.5 to 2 inches that I didn't get the roller into. And then we're going to go ahead and just come back and cut. Okay, so we have our paintbrush, and we're just going to work in here. If you aren't painting your walls, guys, and you still have the tape on just like this, make sure you don't hit the tape. Just work it in really slow. And if I can show you a little bit better how to do this, what I like to do, load up your brush, make sure you get kind of some of the paint off, put a bunch here on the outside, and then work it in really slow, okay? You're just going to go back and forth, pushing that paint that you loaded up out here into that corner all the way. Okay, you're just going to go around your ceiling and do that. Make sure it's nice and full. Don't hit the blue tape. If you hit the blue tape, it's going to bleed behind. It's really tempting to do it, trust me. But even though you have it there, you should never hit it. It's just there in case you accidentally do hit it. So there we go. We're just going to cut a nice straight line all the way around on your ceiling. If you don't have tape and you guys are going to be painting your walls, which I honestly think it's a great idea because it looks better when you're done. Like these rooms out here, we actually are not going to be, these rooms out here, we're not going to be doing that. So let me come over here and show you just a little bit here. So up in here, we're going to be painting this wall. So what you can actually do is when you go through and just fill it up with paint like this, okay? And then just make sure that when you come through here, wipe that off. So you don't want to leave big lines or anything there. You'll see it after you paint your wall too. So get into your ceiling, and it's fine if you just get a little bit of paint on the wall. Just brush it right into that crack, and it's going to give you a really nice crack to go ahead and paint your wall with. So it kind of fills in that crack really good. So when you do paint your wall, it's going to just look a whole lot better. So go ahead, guys, paint all of your ceilings. Go get her done.
And here's just another example of how we paint into the corner, just getting it nice and full of paint, guys, and filling that corner just to help make that wall and ceiling look so much better when it's all said and done. So guys, go ahead and repeat these steps, sand your ceilings once your ceilings are dry, and then go ahead and paint them with a second coat just to make sure it all blends beautifully. And I'll see you in the next lesson.